Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And today we are looking at some news that's coming out of Armenia. A Polish Armenian team discovers a 3,200-year-old golden tomb from the times when Ramses II ruled Egypt. If that's
Yep.
not a fantastical enough title, I don't know what is.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Ramses the second. Moses is, making his way out of Egypt. There's a wonderful time to be alive in the world.
Sea
Simply
peoples, Moses said, "Let my people go."
Yep.
Called a
So
plague.
yeah, there's a wonderful time to be alive.
There's a great Disney movie about this.
Oh no.
At least Ramses.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, the Polish Armenian team discovered this golden tomb during excavations in Metsamor, Armenia.
Yeah. So yeah, the tomb itself is what is known as a cyst grave, meaning that the two skeletons that were found in the tomb were found in chambers that were dug into the ground and then lined with large stones. Um, they appear to have been laid atop a wooden burial bed that has since, by the nature of it being wood, decayed into almost nothing. You gotta love putting wood into the ground.
The
Why
thing
do they
that's
keep
very
doing this?
interesting, though, is the bones were fairly well preserved for being what they are, because bones are organic material, so they are liable to break down and to decompose.
Yep.
And both
Yeah.
skeletons had slightly crouched legs, and they estimate that the couple was between 30 and 40 years old when they died.
Yeah.
Also,
What,
oh yeah,
what, yeah. What I find most interesting about this is because it is a coupled tomb, so it is two people interred in the same spot, clearly intentionally. Is that not only is the cause of death for this couple currently unknown, but there is no sign of reopening or reburial, meaning that both people died at the same time
Oh.
and were buried together.
oh,
Usually, what you see happen is with this sort of spousal arrangement is one person will die, be buried, and then several years later, their partner will die, and people will dig up the grave, disturb it, move things around, and fit the second body in. And there's no sign of someone shuffling a mostly decayed corpse, out of the way a little bit to make room for the second person. No, they were both put in together.
even then, even in this time period, like even if it's not putting in a loved one, you see the reuse of graves
Yeah,
pretty often.
and
Well, and the
that's
thing that
not the
makes
case
this
here.
even more fantastic beyond that, those two features alone, is the fact that because the grave had not been disturbed, it hasn't been looted either. So inside the grave, they found a ton of gold, a couple of gold necklaces. There were dozens of carnelian pendants. The tomb itself dates back to the late Bronze Age, so about 12 to 1300 years before
BC,
Common Era, BCE.
yeah, BCE. So
And
that puts it at about
five.
2,200 years ago, at minimum,
Yeah.
or 3,200. Blah, blah,
Yeah, I
blah,
was
blah.
gonna say it was a little bit higher than
No,
that. Granted, my
I
instinct
can't
went
speak.
5, and I was like, "That's wrong."
I can't speak. I can't speak. Look, it's
But they
been.
also found ceramic vessels, and they also found a flask that was not made locally. That was actually sourced from the Syrian Mesopotamian borderlands. So some really high-end grave goods buried alongside them, stuff that isn't sourced locally. So this couple had some level of power and influence or money.
Yeah. And the big thing too with this is it is uncertain what cultural group, what ethnic group, who was living at Metsamor at this time. So finding these graves, finding these goods is very important because we don't know who we're supposed to be, talking to with this. The graves speak to us, and we don't really know who we're addressing when we look at these goods, look at these people that were interred, look at this site. We don't know who it's supposed to be. And this sort of thing, like grave goods, like imports, all of that is very important to figuring out who was there, what were these people like, because it's an otherwise undocumented culture.
Well, and the thing that makes this even more interesting is the area where they found the grave and where they were doing these excavations is a part of a large necropolis and a large graveyard. It basically consisted of a giant burial mound, which no longer exists to this day. But the interesting thing is, most of it had been looted, as previously mentioned. But except for this one, this is one of the very few that has survived to this
Mhm.
day.
Yeah, yeah, it's very important. Like before I was in landscape archaeology, I was in mortuary archaeology, and
Always fun.
it's
Always
you know
fun.
100 hectare gravesite. That's a full-fledged necropolis. Especially, I believe, uh, later on they talk about the area being more or less fortified with cyclopean walls. So it was, this is a fortified cell. This is a heavily fortified settlement with a massive necropolis attached to it, and that is very exciting when you have the settlement right on top of the graves. Just that level of just interconnectivity, because a lot of times people tend to put the burial sites as far away from the urban area as possible.
I mean,
And
we
this,
do know
yeah.
some of the history behind it. Like, this area was inhabited by the biblical
Hmm.
kingdom of Ararat. It was conquered by King Argishti the
Yeah.
first during his reign.
Mm.
Um, so I mean, it's kind of interesting. And the other thing I find very fascinating is this area was inhabited up until the 17th century without interruption.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, it is
changed?
very fun. Yeah, just like, yeah, like my point is just in the crops is a lot of times, like for example, another culture that was uh in flow at about this time would be the Mycenaean Greeks. They like to go and have their necropolises away from their cities. They have dedicated mound necropoli that are very much, almost a city in their own right, away from the city. And this appears
I
to be
mean, it is
much
a
closer.
necropolis.
Must Yeah, yeah. This necropolis appears to be almost attached to the city, from what the article is saying, and that's always fun because the bones are usually as far away from the city as possible or under the city,
Well, usually
not
because it carries
immediately next
diseases
to.
and other
Well,
negatives.
at least in the Greco-Roman context, it's more of a you the situation of the pomerium where it's like the city boundary. It's a sacred boundary where anything dead should not be inside the city.
Yeah, so
The pomeriums also are used as like boundaries for some things, even like stuff like weapons.
mhm,
Is
So
that
in
why
some
San
cases,
Francisco removed all of its bodies?
mm.
I don't know
No,
if
I
it's
don't think.
that.
I don't know if that, but to my point, just to take a couple things, like with say Napoleonic France, the bodies tend to end up under the city. That's why we have the catacombs in France. Whereas with like these, with like the Mycenaean Greeks, the bodies tend to be as far from the city as you can reasonably go, and just having the necropolis, adjoining the city of the living. That at least as this indicate, that just gets me excited, just because it doesn't really happen. You don't see it fused on like a Chicago suburb. It doesn't fuse into the city most of the time.
Yeah.
It's just very. I just like it. I get very excited about random things involving dead people.
Don't we all?
And that tragic bombshell, I think that's a good point for us to wrap up this episode. If you guys
I was wondering,
enjoyed,
are you going to
please leave
bring
a
that
like
saying
down
back?
below. And please be sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thank you guys for watching.